that's one of my favorite things about the work that I do is that at the end of the day, I know I've raised money for an incredible organization who's going to go out and take care of their community. And for me, there's nothing better. There's nothing better.
Welcome to the Impact Roadmap, a podcast designed to give you the practical, concrete steps to grow your nonprofit or future-forward business in a sustainable way. I'm your host, Joey Goon. Let's get into the episode. So, Kelly, welcome to the Impact Roadmap podcast. It is a pleasure and a privilege to have you here.
I'm so excited to be here, Joey. Thank you for the invitation. This is great.
So we connected. We were just kind of jamming before we hit record. We originally connected through a greater giving workshop, right? That was like right at the cusp of the pandemic, right?
Yeah, the Thought Leadership Summit is what it used to be called, I believe. And I think they've since changed it to something new. But the Thought Leadership Summit, we took some time during that lovely pandemic era that we had. We took some time to really dive deeper into fundraising best practices. And that's where I got to meet you, Joey. That was really fun. We got to learn a little bit more about each other. And I know you do a lot of work in video production and sound and entertainment. So naturally, it made sense that you would be on there with all of us and talking about the wonderful work in the fundraising world. So that was fun. Yeah.
And you have been take us through the origin story. So you are a benefit auctioneer.
Yes.
A BAS specialist.
Correct.
So take us through the origin story. You've been doing fundraising events now and have been an auctioneer helping charities raise money through events for 2 decades.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know why that just sounded more exciting than saying 20 years, but 2 decades, that seems like a long time. You're very well seated. Like you've been around the block, you know this industry.
Yeah.
But before we get there, take us through the origin story from, like inception to now.
Yeah, it's a funny one. I'm glad you asked this because everyone asks me, how did you get into this industry? And it's funny because my brother was a caterer out in Portland and I went and helped him cater an event that was an auction of all things. And he said, come help me with this thing. I was like, all right. I'll help you. I don't know anything about catering, but sure, I'll be there because that's what you do for your family, right? You help your family. So went to the event. I'm standing there with plates of food in my hand and I'm like, what am I doing? And I watched this auctioneer get on stage and I went, oh, well, that looks like fun. So I had a conversation with that auctioneer afterwards and I said, hey, how do I get to be one of your folks out there that are yipping and yoing and yepping and haying? And they said, well, you sound like you are a fascinating person. I said, I am. So let's talk about working together. So we connected and he took me under his wing for a little while. And then, as it were, he decided not to manage people. So I said, okay, I guess it's time for me to start my own business. And so I partnered with several other auctioneers in the area and they would pass me work that they couldn't do because they were booked. And we just kind of started a network to help each other out. And that was kind of the origin story is that I was at an event and I saw an auction and I was like, oh my gosh, this is really fun and fascinating. How can I do that? The auctioneer I worked for a couple of years. And he said, you have a background in music and theater. It kind of fits perfectly that you could be an auctioneer. And I said, all right, well, that could be fun. I guess I should give that a whirl. So I went on to study at the Worldwide College of Auctioneering, which is a 1-week course. It was 8 days long. And I learned a lot of number chants. I learned a lot of tongue twisters. And I learned how to create that chant that is known as the auction chant. And once I discovered my sound, I let that carry me into the future and into what has now been two decades, as you said, of really wonderful, uplifting fun. The fact is I have a fun job, but the best part is that everything I do, it is to better the community that I'm in.
It's beautiful.
It's fun.
What do you think are some of the biggest challenges that nonprofits face when it comes to event planning and raising money through their events?
Well, if you're looking at, vendors in general, I think you have a lot of choices out there on vendors, right? Looking at vendors, there's so many sound companies, there are so many video companies, there are so many auctioneers, DJs, all those folks to help you put your event on, event planners. And the question is, finding the one that's going to work well for your organization. Because I think when you get your A team in place, you will see your profits skyrocket. And it's going to be different for every group. I know I'm not the right auctioneer for every single group. I'd be silly to say I were. Do I want to work with everyone? Of course I do. But I know I'm not the perfect fit for everyone. There's no one person who's a perfect fit for everyone. That's why we have so many people that can work together, and together we all lift the boats, as we said earlier. When the tide comes in, all the boats rise. And I think that's such an important thing to keep in mind. So when you're going out and picking vendors, I think one of the hardest things is coordinating the vendors that you want with the date that you want and making sure that everyone, your whole team that you want, can be there together. I think that's one tough piece of the puzzle when you're looking at how are we going to do this whole thing. I think another thing that's just tough is that everyone's got a lot of different ideas, and sorting through what you want to do, picking which thing is going to work for your organization is so important. You're going to go to a million different nonprofit events. You're going to go to a million different auctions, and you're going to see things that work for them and go, "Ooh, I want to do that." But then when you bring it into your own sphere, you have to really get strategic and say, will this work for our event? Or was it just really cool to see at that other one? So kind of picking and choosing what's right for your audience, and what is that guest experience going to be? Because at the end of the day, we are there to make sure that the guests have such a great time that they go, "Oh my gosh, max out my credit card, please, for this incredible work that you're doing. I'm having a blast," right? Because no one spends if they're not having a good time, right?
So you mentioned strategy. You
Yeah.
mentioned something, strategic that you see at an event that may not work for your audience. But so we really need to sort of double down on strategy, and think about what type of guest experience we want to have. I know strategy is something that's really important for you and for us as well.
Mhm.
Like getting the fundraising ambassador or auctioneer sitting at the planning table with us so that they can be privy and a guide to create some bumper lanes for these strategic and creative conversations for us has been absolutely critical. And many auctioneers, many companies, they don't show up until like 2 or 3 days before the event. They're like, "Okay, here I am, Zoom call, yay, send me the run of show and I'll see you the night of the event."
At
But
7
from
p.m.,
what I
right?
understand is, yeah, exactly. From what I understand, you get involved in the creative strategy. You're a sounding board, you're a thought partner. Let's talk about that. For you, when you think about strategy and guest experience, what are some of the most important things to keep in mind?
Yeah, I think every event is different is the first thing to keep in mind, right? Like you don't want your event to be a cookie cutter of the previous event that you've seen, because the reality is if every event is the same, no one is unique, nothing is fun, everyone's just going through the motions, right? So we need to figure out how to make you as an organization stand out, right? So if your mission if well I mean yeah we one of my favorite examples I should say is that how do you make a mission stand out? How do you showcase your organization? And I've been so lucky to be able to work with some really incredible thought partners that have come up with incredible ideas for events. We pitched an idea for a group once of that was a domestic violence shelter. We pitched the idea of having they have a crisis line, and so we pitched the idea of having a phone that's ringing throughout the night that no one sees, right? And you're not going to see the phone. It's just going to be sitting on a stool somewhere and it's going to ring. And it's never going to get answered the whole night long until the very beginning of the event. When we start the program, someone's going to hear that phone ring. It's going to be louder in that moment. You're going to walk up on stage. They're going to pick up the phone. They're going to say hello and answer as if they were, how can I help you? Like what, whatever their language is in order to answer a phone call of someone who's in a crisis situation. So we pitched that idea, and that's how they started their event. We had the hello, and we heard that what that narrative sounds like, just the first person picking up. And then the MC came to the stage and said, we never let a ringing phone go unanswered, because they're a crisis line and their job is to answer the phone and make sure that anyone who needs help is going to get the help that they need and deserve. So we had it ringing kind of all night long, like through the cocktail hour, and just to create like a, whose phone is that? Okay, well, that's weird. There's a phone ringing, and it would ring intermittently, nothing, over the top. But at the top of the night, they were able to use that moment, and it really showcased their work, that we never let a ringing phone go unanswered. And I thought
Mm.
that was so powerful, because every group is different, right? Every group has a story, a narrative that they want to share. And some of our friends did a great event where it was a furniture bank, and one of the hardest things they have to get their hands on is silverware for people's homes. So they served the first course of their dinner. It was soup, and there was no silverware on the table. And you got a slight murmur of people going, "What the heck? There's no silverware. Do you guys have a spoon? I don't have a spoon. Do you have a spoon?" And so it created an atmosphere in the room of what that really felt like. So, and that's something I think that's really important in the start of your strategy, is how do you be unique in your work, and how do you showcase that work to a group of people who are in your room with you? So we've been fortunate to be a part of events like that. And it was another auctioneer of ours that was on that event with the spoon. So they're like, so you may have realized you've got soup in front of you, but you don't have a spoon. Turns out that's the number one item that they have trouble finding at the furniture bank is silverware.
Mhm.
So the caterer is donating all the spoons and all the silverware tonight to the food bank. So it will be washed, it will be used, and it'll be passed on to other folks. And it was just a great moment to really ground everyone in the work that's happening in that group. So I think that those are the kinds of things that you can do when you have a strategist available, when you have someone who's there to really help work through that with you. You get the opportunity to come up with creativity and creative ways to showcase the work that you do before you even say a word from the stage, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, it is. Gosh, I got chills with the phone ringing moment. I can just hear it.
Yeah, right. It's
Um,
it's
hear the footsteps on stage,
yeah.
the phone ringing. Like I'm visualizing as if I were in that room, and how powerful that moment must have been for the guests that were there to witness that.
It's so cool too, because everyone kind of got like, oh, I heard that phone all night and I didn't answer. There's the other side of that too, right? I heard that phone ringing all night long and I didn't answer it, but they're
Mhm.
here to do that. Whoosh, just all
And
the emotions. I know I get goosebumps because it was so powerful, and it was so it was so great. It was a great moment, and everyone left there like, talk about a first impression too, right? Everyone
yeah,
left there, they were like, whoa, at the beginning of the night. And as our night traveled on and we went through the whole process of talking about the work and talking about the fundraising and talking about where the future was leading and their vision, and then ending the night, we ended it on a high note. It was a pretty intense moment to start on, but we ended it in a place of celebration, and it allowed everyone to go, oh wow, I feel really rejuvenated by their work and I want to continue to support it. So yeah, it's fun, right, Joey? Like, the stuff that
it's
we get
really
to create
amazing.
is really cool.
I talk about one of the most impactful experiences that I ever had as a donor and an attendee at an event. And there was a video story, a 3 to 4 minute video story that was played on the screens of this little girl that was battling a terminal illness. And the
Mm.
only thing she wanted to do was to go see Taylor Swift in concert.
Oh,
And so, of course, after we saw that video, we all collectively were like, oh my gosh, what can we do to help? Before the auctioneer came on stage and asked us to raise our paddles. By the way, this was at a mastermind, which
mhm.
is super cool. This was 100 business owners that were there to learn with each other, to learn from each other. It was sort of like, it was sort of marketed as this business mastermind with a nonprofit bolt on. So all the money that was raised was going to this nonprofit. So this was the nonprofit sort of presentation, and they show this video and they turn to all of us in the audience and they say, I want you all to look in front of you right now at your tables. You'll see a blank card. We're
Mhm.
going to write her a letter together.
Oh.
Terms of love, endearment, tell her how much you appreciate her story. Anything that you want to say to her that you think this, 7, 8, 9-year-old little girl needs to hear right now. And so we sent those letters off. Of course, we fundraised enough money to send her to the Taylor Swift concert. This is a wish organization that grants wishes to kids that have terminal illnesses. And the wish came true. And a month later, I got a video in my inbox of her wish coming true, her entire journey from the time she read her letters from us
Oh.
to her getting the last letter. The last letter was from Taylor Swift, or it was like Taylor Swift's manager, like, hey, we're so excited you're going to join us type of thing. And she flipped. And then you see the video and it takes her on the behind the stage and in the green room with Taylor. It was just amazing. And so that was 8 years ago, 7-8 years ago that I experienced that as a donor. And I still get choked up and emotional when I think about it and when I talk about it, because it's those profound moments of impact that stick with us and that get us away from, and we always talk about, Kelly, the prefrontal cortex is the executive function of the brain. That's the flow state, right? You have to activate that to get into the flow state. The middle of the brain is the social connection, belonging part of the brain. And the back of the brain is the lizard brain, right? And that's the largest part of the brain. And the lizard brain, when you walk into an event, you're always thinking, am I safe and do I belong?
Yep.
And we have to answer those questions immediately, or people will not move into the social part of the brain or the prefrontal cortex part of the brain, which is where deep learning and connection genuinely happens. But first you have to make people feel safe. And the way to do that is to have people turn to each other, connect with each other, talk to each other, network, love on each other, and see stories like that. See their neighbor writing a letter to a little girl, or that phone ringing on stage like you shared, or that the spoon missing at the table. And then you turn to your neighbor and you're like, this is why we're here.
Right.
Wow, this is why we're here.
It's so interesting how when you share stories, the connection that can happen between people, and the stories that are shared from the stage, all of those stories, I mean, even writing, you didn't even get to the appeal yet and you already were taking care of this little girl. I love it. But like when you think about your appeal stories or your fund to need or paddle raise stories, you want a story there that's going to connect you to a human on the other side of that story. Because when you have that connection, is exactly as you said, when you have that connection and people can come together, well, now all of a sudden, everyone wants to work towards the greater good, right? We want to achieve the goal. What's the goal? We want to make that happen because we want to see, we do all on some level, we all want, again, it's that feeling of being safe and that we belong. And we want our community to thrive. Everyone wants their community to thrive. Everyone wants to be friendly with their neighbors. And hopefully in these events that we get to do that on a small scale, right? We don't get to get the whole neighborhood together and be like, hey, by the way, but, and in neighborhood conditions either or necessarily, it's groups of people from the same area. But when we can bring everyone together, all it does is strengthen. It strengthens our community. It strengthens our commitment to being involved in it, which I think is really important. And I think overall, we're able to help other people in the community. That's one of my favorite things about the work that I do is that at the end of the day, I know I've raised money for an incredible organization who's going to go out and take care of their community. And for me, there's nothing better. There's nothing better.
I'm totally with you there.
It feels good.
It feels amazing. And I was, I don't know what your past life was like before finding this work, but I was climbing the corporate ladder, if you will. Mm-hmm. And I just had a conversation with someone yesterday on our podcast who was climbing the corporate ladder, was making $500,000 a year at her corporate job. She was like, 10th from the top of the company, a massive Fortune 500 company. And she never had felt so empty inside.
Yeah.
She's like, I'm missing it. Like, what am I missing? And it was fulfillment. It was time. It was love. It was the significance of, getting meaning and joy out of her work. So she left and she started an ice cream business. And now she has a national brand of this ice cream company. And she's like, and I fall in love with it every single day because you think about that first moment that you take that first scoop of ice cream and you're with your grandma. Uh-huh. And just think about that childhood moment. And it's like ice cream is it just brings us back to the present moment because we're all so connected. And actually connection makes us disconnected because we're just here on our phones all the time, right? Uh-huh. And so events, events and what we do for a living, Kelly, like I have to pinch myself. Like I was
Same.
in her shoes too. And I was made the almighty coin. I was like earning the almighty coin, killing it in my career. And I was like, this is not it though.
Mm-hmm.
This is not it. And I left and joined Utopia, joined the family business, and we started working with nonprofits. And I honestly, I can't believe that we get to help nonprofits raise money for a living through events and video stories. What's the most significant event or impactful event? I mean, the one with the phone is pretty incredible, but is there like think about like that ice cream moment for you when you took that first lick of ice cream as a kid, but for events, what was that like moment for you where you're like, this is the most profound, thing. And you still, that instance or that memory that you still remember today?
I'm going to tell you something. Um, it happens for me a lot. And that's the best thing. It's the
Yeah.
best thing. It happens
Amazing.
all the time for me because every time I step on the stage, I only work with groups that I have a passion for the work they're doing. I think that's so important to be authentic. And so I'm so lucky. I get to work with a lot of incredible groups, and I've seen events that are sometimes the smallest little event can be very impactful. Sometimes the big gigantic event can be impactful. They're all really, really great for different reasons. And truthfully, my husband teases me a little bit because he always tells me, you only remember what's happening if there was an auction involved. I'm like, well, I mean, no, not always, but it's true. I love auctions so much, and every time I take the stage, I always find something impactful in every event because people are getting really strategic and making sure the stories are ones that you're going to remember. So I have so many stories that I remember. They're all really, and every event is just so unique. That's the thing I like about it. When they are unique, it allows you that opportunity to take it in, and it allows you that opportunity to remember it. We've had a lot of great events. I'm trying to think of my favorite one. Let's see. We did one for, this was really cute. It's much like it's a Make-A-Wish kind of situation. And we were able to, every year that I do a Make-A-Wish event, I love it because we get to make wishes come true on stage. So what better way to show your work than to make it happen right there on your stage? And so I think my favorite one was it was so impactful because this young man, he really loved Nike shoes. Oh my gosh, did he love those Nike shoes? And he knew there were new shoes coming out. It's something simple, but for him, he didn't ever get a new pair of shoes, right? So when Nike brought in Tinker Hatfield, who makes the shoes and is amazing, and Tinker delivered him a pair of shoes that weren't even coming out for another like 3 or 4 weeks. They weren't even available on the market. I have never seen someone get so excited over shoes, right? That kind of incredible love of just being able to receive, right? He was able to receive shoes. I mean, there's at the end of the day, they're shoes. They're Nikes, they're cool, they're fun, and they were something new that was coming out. But gosh, it was so impactful for him. It sits with me. I keep that in my mind, and I think, how do we make that moment happen again and again and again? You know, there's so many stories I can tell. I don't even know where to start, but there are so many like that just make me so happy. There it's the spoon, it's the phone, it's the stories of youth. I just recently did an auction that we had one-on-one youth, one-on-one mentors and friends, and it was such an impactful story to hear that these two people who were an adult and a child that were partnered together 25 years ago. 25 years ago, they were partnered together for 12 years of this young person's schooling. They're still partnered together. Like 25 years later, they are still hanging out. He goes to graduations, went to his graduation, went to his wedding, went to kids, like they're still partnered. They still see each other and they still interact. I mean, how does it get any better than that? To know that the work that you've done, and that wasn't work that I did specifically, but they're going to continue to see that happen over and over and over again. that work happened 25 years ago. I wasn't even in business then, right? I was still growing up myself. So, it's fun to see that those relationships can last the lifetime.
So true.
Yeah.
Speaking of lasting a lifetime, I think you'll get a kick out of this one. So the next thing I'd love to dive into is really talking about planning a successful nonprofit event from start to finish. And so one of the things that we're doing, you talked to, just a moment ago about lasting a lifetime. So there's an organization in Kansas City that serves seniors, and they're committed to highlighting seniors and ensuring that seniors can live safe, independent, and active lives, because that's ultimately what keeps you young
Yeah.
at heart.
Mm-hmm.
When you stop learning, you start dying, as one of their seniors put it best in one of the videos we filmed for them last year for their impact moment or their appeal. And so one of the things we're doing this year is we're doing a prom for their seniors.
Fun.
The gala is a prom. And we're bringing the seniors back to the senior prom, 40, 50 years ago.
That's cute.
And their families are going to be in the audience to celebrate the seniors that are on the prom committee and being nominated as king and queen. So when they come in the door, we're asking them to bring a favorite picture from their past.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a big mosaic wall. They're going to post the picture. Then they're going to step up to a red carpet step and repeat area. And we're going to have that picture. They're going to tell us about that memory.
That's cool.
Then they're going to post it on the wall. So I did that backwards. First, they're going to have the picture, tell us about the memory. We're recording all of that for the organization to send back to the seniors later, and so that the families can have that as a legacy moment, remembering their senior,
so great.
forever and ever and ever. Pass that down from generation to generation. Then they're going to post it on the wall, on this big mosaic wall, and the mosaic's going to make the logo of the organization.
Oh, nice.
So that'll be an heirloom for the organization. Then the seniors go in, and it's going to be like, their prom. And so let's talk about how from start to finish, it's like trying to get people grounded in emotion and open up their hearts as soon as they walk into the event. Take us through how you sort of construct an event from start to finish.
Yeah.
What are the most important parts?
For me, I take a lot of time talking. I talk to the clients first, but one of the first things I ask them is, what is your walkaway message? What is the message that you want what is the message that you want your audience to walk away with? When they hear the name of your organization, what is it that you want them? It's like a tagline almost. What is it that you want them to hear? And then what is it what they want them to walk away with? And when we do that exercise, people come up with an idea. And then what we do is we take it and we pepper it through our script, right? So when we get that walkaway message, sometimes it is a tagline for the organization. Like the Oregon Food Bank, their tagline is, so no one is ever hungry, right? No one deserves to ever be hungry. No one deserves to go hungry, right? So that message is stated throughout their script many times. And we work with other event planners on that as well. But they've always had that as their tagline. And so that tagline comes up in the script often. With many of the groups that we work with, we ask that same question. What is your walkaway message? What is the message that you want your audience to know? Because if we can put that in every single speaking person's script, when they hear that somewhere else in real life, someone says something, it's going to be like, oh yeah, that event I went to, and they're going to think of you. And I think that that's important to do. So I think that's the first step, is figuring out with the group. And what we tend to do is we coach them. We do a lot of coaching and say, hey, here's the thing I want you to figure out in your organization, because I could sit there with them for hours and hours and hours doing that, but they know their organization best, so they can figure that out on their own. And then all they have to do is let us know what that is, so we can continue to pepper it in through the scripting. So when we work with groups, that's thing number one for us. When we hear of something that they've done that's pretty incredible, or we come up with an idea that makes sense for them to utilize, like the phone, for instance, hey, what if we were to do this? We'll toss out an idea, and then it's up to them to decide if they want to run with that or if they want to come up with something different. But because we spend 4 hours in our consultation process, but we try and coach them through as much of it we can, and make sure that they're making it an experience for their guests. And then we help script all that to make sure it's going to be a wonderful event on the event night. So I think it's really important that, as you go through your event, you always think about what is your guest doing? What is their experience in that? So even from check-in, when people check in, we need to make sure that we're not handing them too many things because they're going to want to go get a cocktail maybe. So if they're, or a mocktail, if it's an event with folks in recovery, which we do often. So you're going to want to go grab other things, or if we need to write our name down on, pick up a pen, we can't have all this stuff in our hands. So we try and think about the guest experience. And in that, like from the point of carrying things all the way through to what are they hearing in that moment. We had one group do an audio immersion, and it was great. It was an audio immersion, and it was just the sounds of folks. It was a recovery group, and we just said, tell us what brings you hope. And you know what? We got some really great answers to what brings me hope. And they played like 5 or 6 different voices talking about what brings them hope. And it grounds everyone in that moment. So I think that there should be kind of a theatrical element to begin an event and a theatrical element to kind of end an event. Now, you're going to say, why do you think that? And it's partially because I have a degree in theater. So my degree is in theater. And so for me, I want to see something that's going to grab my attention to tell me that the event is starting. But before I leave, I don't want the last thing to be, all right, everyone, thanks so much. It's been really great seeing you. Have a great night. Goodbye. I want something exciting to leave on that's bigger than just like, all right, good night. So if you have something that you can say good night and then end with it, it works really well. And we saw that a lot in the virtual world. We have something exciting like a performance at the end that would help people go, oh, wow, what a great event. And then they leave on a really excited, happy note. So that's the kind of thing that in my mind, that's how I want to see an event. Because when I'm going to take my time out of my day of spending time with my family, I want to make sure that it's going to be, that the people are kind with my time, I guess, and that they're aware that I am giving them this gift of time. So when I go to do an event, I want it to be exciting. I want it to be engaging. And I want to learn what this organization is about if I don't know already. If I already do, I'm going to be like, yeah, this is amazing. And I'm going to be a cheerleader for them along the way. But I think it's really important in that process to really define what your walkaway message is going to be. Figure out what theatrical element you can add at the beginning or the end of your event to make it, exciting, and to make sure that people are going to go, oh, wow, this was a great night. I'm really glad I was here. I mean, because technically check in and check out are going to be the beginning and the end, but in that program, how can you make that program have a little bit more excitement to it? So we work on those pieces. And then I think the pieces that every organization can do well are they know what their organization is about. So they just need to come up and say, here's the work that we're doing. Here's who we are. Here's what we do. And this is why we do it. It's so important to us because the work we do leads to these kinds of incredible stories that you're about to hear. And then, the auction is some fun in the middle, right? The auction it's just a little bit of a change of energy, keep it fun. And then we get super focused on that appeal. And we spend a lot of time talking about that appeal as well. Another portion of that appeal is the strategy that goes into it in terms of who's giving at what level and pre-committing those donors. We like to get in there and get those pre-committed donors in and strategize on how we're gonna take this money that we already have and make more money out of it, because that's the goal, right? Is to make sure that we're making a lot of money. But it's never just about the money. It's also about the awareness. I often say, and I think this is true in business too, if you focus on the people, the money will come, right? So, and that's true of, take care of your employees and your profits will be fine. But also in an event like this, you need to make sure that you are focusing on the people, because when you tell the story of the people and not the story of how much your organization has done and how great you are and how shiny you are, you'll shine through the story of the person that's sharing their journey. So I think it's really important to not focus on you, but to focus on the people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's such a great point.
It's true. It's true in everything, really. I mean, whenever you focus on people, you're that's the key. Focus on, if it's business, focus on your customers. If it's work and you're focus on your employees. profits are always secondary. They will always come if you take care of your people. And it's true too if you take care of your clients. And it's true too if you can, as a client, taking care of one of your your own clients or your own customers, you focus on them. Every single time you focus on the people, the money will come. It will. It happens every time. It's the people that get too bogged down in the numbers that lose sight of what's really truly important. And they are like, no, we got to leave the auction open longer. The silent auction needs to stay open longer. We're not at our goal. Forget about your goal, forget about your goal on the silent auction. The silent auction is made what it's going to make. Let's move on. And I actually had a group that had this, they had a huge silent auction, and they focused on the number that they needed to hit, and they wanted to leave the auction open longer. And I said, please no, let's just end it. And they were about $20,000 shy on their silent auction, which is a big number. But their appeal that we did was slated to make, they wanted to make 40,000, but we ended up making we ended up making 100,000, 60,000 over their goal. So when they were hoping for 40, they ended up making 60 because we focused on the people instead of on the number. And that's just really the key.
For sure. I have this passage that I do. I don't know if are you familiar with Hal Elrod, The Miracle Morning?
No, I'm not.
Highly recommend his book, changed my life. Then I hired him as my life coach. And this retreat that I went to was actually the retreat I talked about earlier with the letter. It was a retreat that he, as my life coach, like that mastermind, it was his retreat.
Yeah.
And I wrote this down sort of as a part of that coaching program that I went through. They encouraged us to read a couple of different books, and then we talked about it. And one of the things that I learned from Hal was the power of like visualization and simple gratitude practices of just like getting grounded and loving on yourself. Because if you can't love you, or you don't love you, you can't love on other people. You can't love others. You've got to love you first. And I don't mean that from a place of arrogance or hubris. I mean like genuinely accepting yourself. And I think that's a hard thing too, when you're running a business and you're running a nonprofit or a for-profit. It's always about like, oh my gosh, it's very hard to come back to self and celebrate the little victories. It's like, oh my gosh, look at everything we accomplished. Like, let's just be grateful for that for a moment before we focus on the next thing. And so I have this passage that I remind myself of every morning, and it's, imagine you're laying asleep on your arm and you wake up in the middle of the night and your arm is dead. You've cut off the power, the flow, and the energy to that area of your body. That is exactly what you do to your brain when you tell yourself that you're not good enough, that you're not smart enough, that you're not powerful enough, that you're not capable enough to do something. You're suffocating yourself from vital flows of willpower, energy, and ambition. And it all comes back to just having simple gratitude practices where you can, like, the desire to go inward so you can love on you and appreciate you and everything you've done in your life. That will then become an essence and a flavor of who you are, so you can really profoundly love on others.
Yep. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. That's amazing. That's a great passage. Thank you for sharing that.
I
I'm
love
gonna
it.
jot that down.
I have to remind myself of that every morning, because it's like things are flat. Like running a business, if you're listening to this, Kelly, and I know you can probably relate, it's like being on a highway.
Yeah.
There's so many, you're just zipping by 100 miles an hour. There's so many, like the cars or emails or tasks or people pulling you in different directions. And sometimes you got to just get off at the next exit and slow down. Just slow down. Hey, I want to mention one thing because I wrote it down. You're theatrical, so you'll really appreciate this. We just did an event 2 weeks ago where the entire event was kind of based off of John Krasinski's Some Great News.
Oh, yes.
Have you seen that on YouTube or Instagram?
I love that. Yes, I think I've seen all the episodes.
So we did all the production, we filmed all the videos, before the event that were showing up on the screens. So you mentioned a moment ago, something that tells me that the event is starting. So we filmed this in the studio, and there was like a black screen behind them, which was one of our LED walls when we filmed it. And she was walking up to the screen, and you heard the footsteps, click, 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 click. And then she knocks on the screen and says, hello. Yeah, you in the black dress in the back, right? It was just like theatrical and fun and animated. and playful. And so everybody knew to take their seats. And then we went into the first Some Great News moment. And the kids of the organization, who are the recipients, were the news anchors reporting on all the great news that the organization has done in the community over the last 12 months. So they were able to talk about how awesome they were as an organization, but it wasn't coming from the board. It wasn't coming from the executive director. It was coming from the people that are benefiting from the organization. And then the kids, because it's an organization that provides equipment and therapy and musical theater for kids, all these different programs, the kids actually performed. And so if you can imagine like a Jimmy Kimmel, when they go into the green room, or Jimmy Fallon, or the Oscars, you've got like this backstage cam. So we had a backstage cam where guests could ask the kids questions. They had a QR code and they could type questions into the kids that are going to perform later tonight. And then we'd read those questions to the kids backstage and they got to answer them with the backstage news anchor.
I love that.
It's just like this interactive element where the audience was involved. Everything was centered around great news. Everybody was hyped and exciting. And then we went into the appeal, and the appeal for this particular event, it wasn't one of those like gut punching, heart wrenching, oh my God, we need your help. It was more of, we want to make more great news like this happen. And it was the kids in the video making the ask. It's super cool. So
amazing.
I bring all of this up because it's like, all of those moments lead up to this bigger moment, which is the appeal when we ask for the money. What makes a good appeal, Kelly? And you mentioned a moment ago, pre-commits. Like, I imagine like once you get that momentum going, I mean, I don't imagine, I've seen it. It's like when you get that momentum going, there's like peer pressure. It's like, oh, well, if they did 10,000, I'm going to do 10. So number one, what makes a good appeal? Number two, how do you get pre-commits?
Okay. Number one, what makes a good appeal is momentum and pre-committed donations. So you said both of them, which I love. So, the thing is that the momentum going up to your appeal, right? The momentum leading up to your appeal, you build your auction as like, I always like to say in a bell curve, or what I call shoot the moon, where it's just like, we're going straight to the highest height that we can go. And you build that slowly so that things get more exciting as you go along throughout the night. But then from there, the next thing you want to do is have a really good story. You need to have a good story. You all chose to do it in, here's some good news about great news about things that we're doing. I think that's a really great story. I think that sometimes, as long as you keep the story about like on one journey, right? So oftentimes we'll tell one person's story, but that Some Good News did something that was really great. It told the story of the organization. It was all about the organization and making that organization look shiny, but through some great news. So that was a way that you could do it and keep a little layer of excitement and fun and positivity around it, which is great. So I think that's great too. So you got to keep it either. One thing I will say is if you have a devastating story, people are going to hear that, and it's not going to take them higher into their height of, oh my gosh, I've got to give. It's going to hurt. So I've heard the devastating story before, and it is hard. It's heart-wrenching, and it's hard for the person who has to speak after, which is usually the auctioneer, because all you want to do is hug the person who just shared this really hard thing that they went through. So I prefer to go with a story that has a positive outcome, if at all possible. So if you're serving a demographic where someone may have passed, you might want to talk about the person who survived rather than the person who passed. It's a tough topic. It's tough. It's so hard. So I think it's really important to really focus on, this is a journey of positivity. Sometimes they can be positive, even though the person has passed as well. But make sure the story is positive and that your audience, again, remember, it's the guest experience that's important here. Make sure your audience can digest it, and your audience is going to say, oh my gosh, I need to max out my credit card. That's Some Good News thing. Sounds like it was really positive, and people were like, oh my gosh, I'm sure they were throwing money at this stage because it was perfectly done. It's exciting. And you were able to showcase multiple stories because of the format that you use, but that format was drawn all the way through from the beginning of the event. So it made sense in the overall arc and the overall narration of your entire event. So consider that too. So good story makes it's really important. I think the other thing that is really important, which you kind of tied in your storytelling and your pitch at the same time with your some good news thing, is that when you have a good pitch, the pitch is where someone comes up after we've told the story, we have someone come up and ask people to give. If you don't ask them to give, they aren't going to. You have to literally say, friends, oh my gosh, we could not do this work without you. We are so grateful. It's best to come from the person who is telling their story, I think. The number one person, if you've shared your story and you show up on the stage, if a video has played of your story and you come up on the stage and you say, now, friends, I'd like to ask you to please give and give generously tonight. That is a perfect person to ask because they have just shared their story. You don't want a board member coming up right after that and saying, okay, give us money, because that doesn't really work. But it has to be a thoughtful ask. And it's really great when it's done by the person who is who's shared their story. It's also, I want to just point out, it's empowering when they do it. When they share their own story and then they ask you to continue to support this organization, that's empowering. What's not empowering is if you share their story and then you ask on their behalf. That's exploiting. And that's where people get a little bit nervous about, I don't ever want to exploit my clients. Well, you won't if you let them tell their own story and empower them to do so. So I think that's a thing that's really important to note there. The third part is the collection, and that's up to the auctioneer. Now, the collection is the part where we start at the high levels and we work our way down through the numbers and ask people to give, and they throw their cards up in the air. Now, that's where the pre-commits come in. So the pre-commits, to answer part two of that question, the pre-commits are the opportunity to ask folks that love your organization, will share with you, will give to you whenever you ask, to come in with their large gifts to motivate the audience to give. So I think it's important to have people who are committed to your organization saying, I'm ready to give 10,000. You can have those conversations ahead of time because people are not going to decide on event night to give you $10,000. And if they do, cool, but you might pick up one just because you already had someone at that level. But I also think it's important to figure out how to leverage that. And there's so many different ways to do this, but we like to see people kick off their event with 3 people at their highest level. We think that creates great momentum in the appeal, and momentum is part of what the appeal will help others to give. Because if you have 3 hands go up, people go, oh, wow, look at this. Everyone's ready to give. That's exciting. And then it carries on to the next level. So if you start 10,000, someone might be like, well, I don't want to be the top level, but I can give 5. Okay. And they'll put their hand up. So it allows you to kind of continue. But if you have one person at 10,000, then no one at 5,000 and no one at 2,500, and your next level is at 1,000, you might want to reconsider how you're leveraging that $10,000 gift. So again, there's lots of ways to bake this cake. We've seen some incredible strategy come up from different organizations with matching and double matching and sometimes triple matching. And we've had some fun activities where we've tried to offer like a 10 times match that could be employed at like at a $1,000 level, and it is matched 10 times every time someone gives. There's a lot of things that you can do depending on what you want to set up and who your audience is. But when we get those pre-committed gifts, it helps us determine how we should plan that appeal. It shouldn't just be, okay, we have to raise $50,000. It should be, okay, we need to raise $50,000. Do we think we can get 2 people at 10,000? That would be a great start. And then work our way down from there. Or if it's 2 million, which is also, it's a big appeal, but it can be done. We've seen groups raise, the last event I did, they had, I think, a 1.5 million in their appeal alone. And then the rest of the money that they raised was in their auction and everything else. So it's possible to raise $1 million in your appeal. So you just have to get the strategy right. And talk to a strategist. That's the best thing you can do. Get involved with folks who understand how this works and call them and say, can we get some strategy ideas from you? Or could we hire you for a strategy call? They may do that. That might be something that they're willing to do. It may take a couple calls to get there, but if it helps you raise more money, that's what we're here for. That's my favorite part too. The strategy of the appeal is my favorite, Joey. Oh my gosh. I cannot tell you how much I love strategy and planning and seeing major donors come together to catapult the giving in the room or to catapult the giving online to make sure that people are giving as much as possible. It's really quite fun. So that's fun for me to do.
What advice would you give to a nonprofit that's sort of evaluating the success of their event? So like the event's over, they're looking at the numbers. What advice do you have?
Well, I think in many cases, if you go in with a plan and you go in and you are planning specifically to hit your target goals, you're either going to do it or not. And if you don't, it's okay. It's okay. I think people get too hung up on, oh my gosh, I didn't make my numbers. But like, here's the thing. When it comes down to it, if you didn't hit those numbers, look at your data. You have data now, right? So if it was a first time event, you now have data that you can look into and decide, is this is this what we need to be doing for our next year's event? Or how do we need to change things? What things sold well? What things didn't sell well? How can we look strategically at this instead of just casting a net hoping we get some stuff? Because there's so many different layers to this too, Joey. Like when you really think about it, if you get an item and it doesn't sell well, how does that, not only is that not great for you, but your bidders didn't want it, but now your donor is also going, well, I gave them this item and they didn't even sell it for very much. So are they going to want to donate again? So that's why strategy is so important in an event like this. You have to get strategic. And when you do, most people, when they're being strategic, they hit their goals. It's just the truth of it because they break it down into bite-sized pieces and they know that they can do it. If you don't have a strategy and you don't have a breakdown, it's going to be much, much harder to attain the goal. But if you get to the end of it, and you're like, gosh, that was a really great event. It was super fun, but we didn't make any money. Okay, how do we change it for next year? It's not like, well, gosh, that didn't work. We got to scrap it entirely. It's how do we change it for next year to make more money? Okay, did we spend too much money? Okay, maybe that was part of the problem. Maybe we need to look at different people to help us in the process to get to where we need to go. Makes sense. I mean, like it's just a little
100%.
different. Yeah, just you got to look at it in a different light or call someone else and say, "Hey, what's your take on this?" I would also survey your audience and see what they liked and what they didn't.
I love that you bring that up. We
Yeah.
always say, I just had a podcast conversation a couple of weeks ago with Ria Wong, who is a nonprofit consultant. And she wrote a book on fundraising and she helped take a nonprofit from, I think it was a $100,000 nonprofit. And when she exited, it was over $3 million an operating budget, which is awesome. And so now
Right.
she's like, I understand every executive director's pain. And her message and her mantra is like, it's not the end of an event. It's the beginning of a relationship. If
Correct.
you do a good job at the event, then that's an opportunity for you to start picking up the phone, figuring out what people love. Kelly, to your point, gather surveys, allow people's voices in the room the night of your event. Like instead of doing a post-event survey, we do during event surveys. We ask a person one question, scan the QR code. We're going to make it a formal thing where the whole audience does it. So it's not just something they pass by, right? Scan the QR code. If the event is, we ask them, rate the event so far from 1 to 10. How connected do you feel? And, usually we get somewhere in the range of, 8 to 10. And we're like, if it's anything less than a 10, can our director of development or director of advancement call you on Monday and figure out what we can do next year to make it a 10?
Yeah.
Yes. Cool. What's your preferred method of communication? Text, call, email. Great. And then the director of development has a list of people that he or she can call that following week to say, hey, I'd love to set up a coffee meeting with you. I'd love to learn more about you. What'd you love? What would you love to, right? And then you have an audience that like people give energy towards the things they get to create.
Yeah.
Allow them to co-create the future event experiences that they want, right? So, but you have to start by sort of asking for that feedback.
Yeah.
And picking up the phone and starting to create those relationships with people instead of simply evaluating your event on a financial success. It's really about, did we connect people?
Yeah.
Are they motivated? And can we build more meaningful relationships with them now because they've been to our event and they're connected to the mission?
I love that you're surveying them in the middle because that's fascinating to me because you have an opportunity there that it just creates, okay, people who want that connection with the development director to understand the organization better or to have more of an input into what happens next. Now, as the development director, you have someone that you can actually cultivate as a donor because we talk about connection, right? And we want connection between the organization and and the donor that's out in the room. But there's no better way to do that than through donor cultivation. When you really get to sit down and partner people within the organization to further learn more about your donors, that's how you start getting the right items for the right crowd, so that your items go through the roof when you go to sell them, because that your friend Sheila over here is going to be going to on a trip to New York every single year. Put the trip to New York in your auction, and Sheila's going to be like, oh yeah, these are great. Or Sheila's going to help you get everything you need for that trip, and you've got someone that can help you with your procurement and things of that nature. So I think that the connection between donors and folks in the organization is also equally important, not just to the overall organization, but to the people within. And oftentimes we'll find that folks will go to the next, we have development directors and executive directors and staff moving all the time. And sometimes those people create such a great relationship with the person that they go to the next organization with them, but they still stay with the old organization because they love the work. So, there's a lot of key pieces that have to happen there too. Like when someone's leaving an organization, the handoff of the donor relation for that organization, even though that donor may go and find another organization they like, with the transference of the person to the next job. So, that's not bad. That just means you have someone who's ready to support two organizations, which is great. So I just think there's so much interesting psychology behind all of the fundraising world. But I really think when you come down to everything, it's about connection. As humans, we want to be seen, we want to be connected, we want to give, we want to share, we want to be in community with each other. So when that opportunity is there and exists, and we get to do that through the nonprofit world and through events, you can have a little fun while you're in community. That's great. So I just, yeah, Joey, I think we're lucky people. I think we're really lucky people with what we get to do.
100%. I couldn't agree more. What do you see? Last question. What do you see as the future of nonprofit event planning? Like, how do you think the industry will evolve?
I think the industry, oh wow, that's a great question, because we got to pioneer something new through the pandemic with like virtual events, right? And now we're looking at these hybrid events. So we were in this like spot, right, for years and years of live events, live events, live events, and especially for auctions. I speak mostly from the lens of an auction. So we had live auctions, and then it's like, oh my gosh, we have to figure out how to raise money with people at their homes. How is that going to even possibly happen? Boom, we did it. We created virtual events, and it was fun, and people had so much fun with them. And now we have people that are looking at like getting back to live auctions is going to be so exciting, but we have all these new tools in our toolbox, right? We've got all these new tools in our toolbox. We've got people that are still staying at home and watching an event, or if they get sick and can't go, they still have the opportunity to participate with these hybrid events. So this hybridization, I think, is going to be very, very exciting to see how it continues to grow. I do think people are just excited to be back in community, and that's been very evident from the number of people that we've seen at events and the growth we're seeing, because we're seeing live events just take off again. I mean, I don't know what you've seen, Joey, but I'll tell you, the events that I did this past spring, everyone was excited to be in the room and everyone was excited to give. We've seen like record breaking events. Every event is like highest event ever, highest event ever. So that's been lovely. We've loved that a lot. But I mean, there's so many different ways to do an event. But I guess my hope for the future is that people really dive in and they look at what their organization is about and share in a way that is going to be memorable for people to understand their work without breaking the budget, right? We still have a budget to keep to, so we have to be thoughtful in it. But how expensive is it to put that phone on a chair in the front of the room? How expensive is it to not put the spoons out until a few minutes later? Like that doesn't cost you anything. How can we find small ways to make a bigger impact so that people say, wow, I want to give a little bit more because I am really moved by the work that they're doing? And how can we really get people to engage in the work and come back in, not just with their money, but with their time and energy? Because, people say time is money. It's true. But all these organizations need people to come in and volunteer and help. They can't do it on their own. So it's more than just, creating an event that's fun. That's great. But how do we make that fun event something that brings people back to the organization multiple times throughout the year so that they can continue to do their great work and bring their friends along too? I, the future of events, I think, is going to be really fun because I think we have an opportunity to shape it to whatever we think will be beneficial for folks. And I think there's going to be a lot of people like you and I, Joey, who get to talk and say, hey, how can we do this differently to make sure that our guests are not only having a great experience, but are engaged throughout the year? And I hope that events start bringing people back more to those organizations because they need it.
Yeah, it's so true. I want to make like one little mention here on hybrid because I think it's an important piece to just to draw a little bit more attention to, because I do think hybrid creates a tremendous amount of opportunity. Mm-hmm. And it's that like putting a camera in the back of the room and saying, yay, we're doing hybrid and we did it for $500 because we saved a bunch of money and it's going to work. That's not hybrid. Doing hybrid is enabling people to have the same type of community online that they can in person. So let me give you an example. We did a hybrid event recently with an organization, and we're a production company, but as you can tell from the conversations that we've had, and I love that both of our organizations are thinking more deeply about what it means to create a great event experience. For us, it's not just, oh yeah, when you call us, we're not going to tell you, oh yeah, you need 3 microphones and 4 speakers and right, a couple projector screens or LED walls in the room, and you've got a great event. Like, if we're not, I don't mean to disparage, but we're not that AV company. We're very much about like, let's sit at the partner with awesome partners, or sit at the table with awesome partners like Kelly and strategize and think about how to create a super meaningful experience. For us, that's taking it 50 steps further. So we did this for an organization out of Nepal. They obviously, it's cost prohibitive to bring their recipients in Nepal in the room. Mm-hmm. But we brought them in the room digitally.
Yep.
So we had breakout rooms online. So the virtual audience on Zoom could jump into breakout rooms and have conversations with translators, with the kiddos who were benefiting from the organization in Nepal.
That's great.
And then we could bring those donors from the breakout rooms. We could bring the kids up on screen and have the kids say hi to the in-person audience. We could bring the donors and ask them, hey, what'd you learn from some of those kids that were in the breakout rooms with you? What'd you learn? And they could actually raise their hands and the auctioneer could bring them up on our screens. She just point and say, hey, bring up Kelly. Boom, Kelly pops up on the screen. Kelly, what'd you love about some of those kiddos you connected with in the virtual breakout room? Oh my God, I found that they were living in this place and like it was a mud hut and like we provided housing for them. And like they have a house now, but there's 15 people living together in this community, and our funds were able to provide them the resources that they needed to be able to build a house. And anyway, I digress. Awesome. But the point is just like using hybrid technology in a way that allows your audience to more deeply connect with your recipients, to more deeply connect with each other. That's hybrid done well. And I think that is the future of events.
Yeah. Technology, the technology that we have is incredible and it's served us well over these years, right? But we can do so much more now. We can do so much more. Why would you not dive into that technology and utilize it in a way that's going to enhance your event? I mean, yeah, get a Zoom call going with the folks in Nepal. I love that. I love that so much, Joey. It's so great because you now are bringing them in the room for people to understand more. That's exactly what this is about. And you know what? If it means you have to have, there's so many things. Like it's online bidding and doing that instead of having the silent auction. It's so many different things. But you're right. Putting a camera in the back of the room and just having it, that's a streaming situation, but it's not bringing your donors into the room and making them feel connected. We try to, when we do hybrid events, we try and make sure that we're recognizing donors in real time on the actual live stream. We're trying to recognize donors in real time as we're recognizing people in the room because we want them to feel like they're a part of it. And if they don't get that feeling that they're a part of it, they're gonna check out. So it's so important to us that we continue to dive into what new technology exists. For sure. Yeah.
Any last parting words of advice for anyone listening who is planning an event?
You know what? Look and see what other people are doing. If it makes sense, you too can do it, and reach out to them and ask how they did it, first of all, because you don't need to recreate the wheel. People are here to share, and just because someone did something doesn't mean they won't share with you. So I like the idea of sharing, and share your ideas with others too if you think it's something that will work for them, because we're all in this together. There's so many incredible organizations out there, and I think it's so important that we all bag each other, because we all have a certain demographic that we serve, but together we serve all of us here on this globe together. So I think it's important to share when you can, and talk to each other, and find the people that are going to work best with you. If you find that the person you're working with isn't working really well, okay, that's okay. Well, like I would shake your hand and say thank you. It's been a pleasure, and offer you some other folks that I think might be great for you too. So that's what we're here to do. And the people that believe in lifting each other up and seeing all the other boats rise, that's the kind of folks you want to work with, because we're not in it for accolades for ourselves. We're in it to make sure that we're bettering our community. So look for folks that are going to help lift you up, is what I would say. And make sure that if you have any ideas that you think are great, share them with everyone, because we all need help. And I know, Joey, you've got a nonprofit community that shares on Facebook, and I know there are a bunch of different groups out there that are sharing ideas. So get in there and share your ideas with each other, for sure.
That's a beautiful note to end on. Kelly, thank you so much. Kelly from Artisan Auctions, joining us on the Impact Roadmap podcast today. Really appreciate your time, your heart, the energy, and your gifts that you're contributing to the world. Everybody go reach out to Kelly. Kelly, where can they find you?
You can find me online. It's artisanauctions.com. I am on social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. You can find us there as well. And if you need to, you can always give us a jingle. It's 503-734-7287.
That's awesome. We'll put that in the show notes as well. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for spending your morning with me.
Thanks, Joey. This was delightful. I appreciate you having me.
Hey, if this episode was valuable to you, then share it with someone that you love, someone that you know that could benefit from it. Also, be sure to subscribe, and depending on how you're listening, go ahead and leave a comment or review. This will help ensure that we are connecting with other nonprofit leaders so that we can get this critical information out to them. And if your company is in the early or even late stages of putting on an event, go to our website, utopiaexperience.com, and click the Book Us tab and schedule a free discovery call to see if our services would be a right fit for your event. And even if they're not, that's okay. I promise you our expertise can steer you in the right direction, so you'll get value either way. Thanks for listening to the Impact Roadmap, and we'll see you next time.